What's up guys, Manime here, and today we are talking about My Hero Academia again. You guys seem to enjoy the last few videos on the subject, and it's still a little bit too early to talk about any of the seasonal anime yet, so I figured, hey, I still have something I really want to discuss about the show, so let's make probably my last video on My Hero Academia. Today's video is about the one, the only, Bakugo, the crazy, hothead, and #1 student of UA Academy. So I want to explain why I believe that he will become the next #1 hero. Before we begin, let me throw out a little disclaimer for all you manga readers who are already probably typing in the comments as I speak. I know, technically, someone else will become the #1 hero, but I'm talking about after that person. That's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to save everyone from spoilers in both the video and the comments section, so please keep that in mind throughout the rest of this video. So let's break a few things down. I think we can all agree that the next #1 hero will be either Midoriya, Todoroki, or Bakugo. I know there's a lot of people in this class, but I think we're given sufficient context clues that it's gonna be at least one of these three. So let's break down all three characters and see how they hold up, starting with the weakest link, Todoroki. I know, a lot of people will be surprised by this, but quite honestly, Todoroki is just not on the same level as Midoriya and Bakugo, which is ironic because his quirk is debatably the strongest one out of the trio. Where Todoroki suffers is mostly his mindset and general intelligence. Don't get me wrong, I'm not calling Todoroki stupid, he's extremely smart, but as you're gonna find out, the more we look into Bakugo and Midoriya, we find out that these two are basically geniuses. Todoroki's just not smart with his quirk. The only real innovative technique we see him pull is combining his fire and ice in the fight against Deku. Other than that, it's just basic fire blast and ice wall. This is fine if you're a basic hero, but to be a top hero, you have to be extremely smart with your quirk. Just in the last episode, we see Endeavor use his heat to melt his feet into a wall and run up it. This is a case of a top hero using his powers in an innovative way, and we just don't see any of that in Todoroki. As for his mental state, we have issues there also. We see him having family problems with his mother and father, and that greatly affects his ability to fight in the tournament. And for those of you who say he's completely over that, I heavily disagree. Another example is when we see Todoroki make a rash decision to leave and help Midoriya. Although in the end it was definitely the right decision, it still shows that Todoroki is battling emotional problems that affect his decision making in volatile situations, prioritizing helping a friend who is possibly in need versus helping people who are absolutely in need. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm going to kind of use Todoroki as a punching bag for this video, just because he happens to be the center around a lot of my future examples. I love Todoroki as a character, and I just want to apologize in advance if this video ends up kind of hurting your image of him. Anyway, let's continue on. So I think I've established a pretty sound argument of the discrepancy between Todoroki versus Midoriya and Bakugo. So let's break down Bakugo and Midoriya together. When it comes to quirks, it's honestly no contest. One for All beats Bakugo's explosions 1,000,000 to 1. Hell, as I said, Todoroki's quirk is definitely way stronger than Bakugo's also. But what Bakugo lacks in power, he makes up for in intelligence. Bakugo is a genius. But here's the problem with this argument. So is Midoriya. So what makes me so certain that Bakugo will beat Midoriya to being the #1 hero? Well, it's all about what kind of genius he is. Midoriya is a fast learner, like really fast. We see this theme throughout the show, and I think most people would consider him a genius for it. We see Midoriya steal moves from Bakugo, steal the fighting style of Gran Torino, and even steal a few techniques from All Might. But Bakugo is different. Whereas Midoriya just learns from others, Bakugo is an innovative genius. Yes, I know he is an arrogant prick and he's always talking shit, but if you look at him, he really backs up what he says. We see him use his quirk to its fullest potential. He is constantly coming up with new techniques and outplaying others, even including Midoriya himself. Midoriya is a quick learner, but Bakugo adapts to situations and creates, which is an extremely rare trait. There's a reason, despite Bakugo's so-so quirk, that he's still #1 in the class. So I'm sure a few of you are probably not convinced completely yet, so let me bring up another point where Bakugo beats Midoriya: his mindset. Now once again, Midoriya's mindset is far from bad. It's honestly incredible, but he still loses to Bakugo. Let's go ahead and take a close look at the tournament arc, and more specifically, the battles. Let's examine Midoriya versus Shinso and Bakugo versus Uraraka. Despite getting information on his opponent before the battle begins, Midoriya almost loses. Now I do admit it's hard to call it arrogance on Midoriya's part, but I do think it's a case of Midoriya not taking the fight as seriously as he should have. A mistake like that can kill you on the field against villains, and Midoriya made that mistake, showing that he still is a bit immature. So let's look at Bakugo versus Uraraka. Despite Bakugo being a #1 student fighting against a girl whose quirk isn't specialized for combat, he tries his absolute hardest against her. At no point does he underestimate her or let her get too close to him. He takes the fight seriously. He knows what his opponent's techniques are, he learns their win conditions and takes that into consideration, and then he fights around it. He isn't making the same mistakes that Deku makes. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an unfair example, so let's pull another. Let's just go to the next round. Let's go Midoriya versus Todoroki and Bakugo versus Kirishima. Both fights where our two characters should lose due to their skills being countered. I know some of you guys are probably rolling your eyes since Bakugo beat Kirishima quite quickly, but remember, Bakugo really should have lost that fight. Whereas Uraraka losing the fight was no surprise, Kirishima's quirk is built for close combat and is particularly effective against Bakugo's quirk. But once again, Bakugo takes the fight extremely seriously. He predicts Kirishima's win condition and finds a way to counter it, thus leading Bakugo to another win. So let's go ahead and pick on Todoroki a little more. The Battle of Midoriya versus Todoroki really stresses Midoriya's biggest flaw. Sometimes Midoriya loses concentration on the goal at hand. In other words, fucking beating Todoroki. Midoriya's mentality is great in theory, but as we can see from this fight, him helping Todoroki over this hurdle with his parents doesn't come at a free price. He permanently scars his hands in this fight, which eventually leads to something worse, which is in spoiler territory, but my point still stands. Midoriya often lets emotions get in the way, very similar to Todoroki. Instead of running to help the other heroes fight the Nomus, Midoriya runs off in search of Ida. Obviously, as I said earlier, this ends up being the correct decision, but with the given information that he had at the time, he really shouldn't have. Midoriya is somewhat immature in that regard, whereas we see countless occasions where Bakugo has a firm grasp on what the appropriate decisions are. He knows how to abuse advantages like the fight against Tokiyami, but I do perhaps have my favorite example out of all of this: Bakugo versus Todoroki. This is my favorite example that I give to people when I explain how I know that Bakugo is stronger than Todoroki. Before the fight, we see Bakugo egging on Todoroki to use his flames. In the fight, we get to see Bakugo intentionally going after Todoroki's flame side. And finally, we get to see Bakugo's insane move once Todoroki finally gives in. In the last minute, Todoroki essentially gives up. So obviously, Bakugo was angry about this, and for a good reason. In his own words, he wanted an indisputable victory. I can guarantee you that Bakugo had a contingency plan for when Todoroki used his flames. Why do you think he was basically refusing to end the match beforehand? Not to mention, this just kind of furthers my point about Todoroki's mental state. Thus, due to Bakugo's innovative intelligence, his incredible maturity in fighting, specializing against countering opponents, and his somewhat tactile quirk, he will become the next #1 hero. Granted, there is one little plot hole that I've left out until now. In the opening, Midoriya literally states this is a tale about how he became the #1 hero. Believe it or not, this actually completely fits into my theory. I stated that Bakugo will be the next #1 hero, not that he will hold on to that title forever. When you boil it down, the only thing that Midoriya is missing is a bit of maturity and innovating with his own powers. Maturity is something that I'm sure will come with time and experience, but innovation is something that we are slowly seeing Midoriya learn. The first time we see this happen is when Midoriya figures out that he can break his fingers instead of his entire hand. Granted, this has been the only time we've seen any sort of innovative bone in him, that's also not shattered in a million pieces, but still, it's a sign. So far, he's been taught or learned everything he knows, but I believe soon he will begin innovating. Once this happens, due to his quirk being more powerful than Bakugo's, he will eventually pass him up, making Midoriya the next #1 hero. Of course, after Bakugo. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys like this kind of content, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I would like to eat tonight. This is actually a video I've been sitting on for a while, and I'm glad I finally got to make it. Hopefully there isn't like a massive hole in this theory that I just completely overlooked, but if there is, I'm sure you guys will let me know down in the comments. Also, I did a podcast with the Anime Summit. I'm pretty sure it's up by now. If not, I'll let you guys know when it goes up, but it'll be linked down in the description. So go check that out. It ended up being a really fun podcast. Make sure you guys share, like, comment, and subscribe. This is Man. Make sure you guys say, man, go watch that goddamn anime!